Good evening, workshoppers. So, as you remember, in our previous episode, we made some predictions, some safe bets, and some bold guesses as to what was going to go through and happen at BlizzCon Line. And so here we are, just a few days removed. We've got all the info, we've got all the deets, and now we're going to go back and look at how we did. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? And also just talk about some of the things that we went through and learned over the past weekend. And as I mentioned on the last episode, we've got Leviathan and Dredscythe joining me here again on episode 204, How'd We Do? So, gentlemen, welcome back.
I guess we didn't do badly enough to the point where you actually want to have us back on the show.
That remains to be seen.
It's gonna be the last episode we're on.
I will go out and say this. Do either of you remember all of your predictions?
No. My mind is a scramble of everything. And also, that was a wild Alyssa passing behind me.
That's why I was laughing. I only remember my bold take on Immortal, and it was all.
I actually don't remember like half of the predictions that I made when I was going back through and listening to them to transcribe it and see where our overall landing was in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, so in this episode we'll be going just like last episode. We'll be going kind of like by title and seeing where things kind of hit. We obviously. This is being recorded on Wednesday, the 24th. We just had some news outside of BlizzCon about Diablo 3 drop yesterday, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go into Diablo 3 itself, which coincidentally is also the very first topic on the list. But yeah, this was one of the easier ones, and it all kind of, it's a 50-50. All of our predictions were relatively the same. We were all in agreement on Diablo 3 that it was like, it's not going to get a presence at BlizzCon itself, and it's probably just going to get a blog post. And if we had to come down to it, like my prediction was, it was just going to be a blog post like Immortal, where it was actually during the convention itself to talk about what's happening with Diablo 3. And in that aspect, I was wrong, because it wasn't during BlizzCon. We got the PTR patch notes yesterday, so I was off on that mark. But correct on, it wasn't going to be featured in the presentation itself. Leviathan, you were also, I think you were closer than I was, because you had said that we're going to receive updates in the wake of BlizzCon, and so you got pretty close on that one. And then Dread also said we're going to get some updates within a week or two of BlizzCon, and so here we are. We got. Just a few days afterwards, and we've got a new PTR with some pretty substantial changes to the game. It might not look like it at first, but this is huge. This follower update that they've got going on, in addition to some changes to the leaderboards. I know you have to be pretty excited for this one, Leviathan.
You can see like the stupid smile creeping across my face. Man, I just. Two things come to mind when I see changes of this nature for Diablo 3 at this time, because we're almost 9 years into the life of Diablo 3, and I thought these systems were just off limits. Like, here's the thing, right? We've had so many discussions on this podcast in the past of like, oh man, if they would ever touch this system, here's how we change it. And so many of those conversations, I was like, well, let's not really get too excited for D3. Maybe we're kind of giving them ideas for D4. And then they go and do this. They actually change followers, a staple of the game since day one. And the system literally hasn't really been touched since then. I remember I was actually just talking to somebody maybe a day or two ago that I think the last time followers were kind of in the zeitgeist of the community, it was before the release of Reaper of Souls. People were like, hey, maybe they'll add an extra follower for the expansion. And then they didn't, and no one talked about followers ever again.
Yeah. I think it was actually like one of the first article series I wrote for Diablo fans was, what if they continued the storyline for the followers since
Oh,
they
yeah.
since they all kind of left off on cliffhangers and then never went back to them. Which I guess for those that might not be in the know, the big thing that they announced for the PTR was they have a follower system revamp. They're now going to be able to equip up to 14 different items, so they're going to have like the full item allotments that your character does, plus the follower item slot. But they now have this emanate system, so that way you can equip them with very specific legendaries and set pieces, and you will gain the bonus while it's equipped to your follower. Usually it's going to be some like little tiny buffs or nice quality of life changes and such. Like, say Broken Crown, if you want to target farm one specific gem, it hurts your build because everything is so refined, especially if you're trying to do like Torment 16 Rifts and such, to speed clear them to make them worthwhile, it's hard to fit in like that Broken Crown to guarantee you're getting all those gems like in the early part of the season. Now you can do it. Now you can target farm emeralds. Now you can target farm whatever. Gloves of Worship is a nice, flavorful like buff item that gives you some good bonuses, but you can never work into a build. Or Avarice Band. Things like that you're gonna make sacrifices to equip it just because it's such a huge quality of life increase. Now you can put it on your follower, and while single player will give you those bonuses.
Yeah, and one of the things that some people have been keying in on is that this is really going to help solo players during their T16 time in particular, because so many of the powers, maybe most noticeably the sets that they've actually now activated on followers for Canes and Sage, which is keys, Greater Rift keys, and Death's Breaths respectively, being able to guaranteedly get more of those, whichever you choose to focus on. And there are even some thoughts out there that maybe Ring of Royal Grander will work on the follower, not as an emanate item, but as just strictly for the follower, so you can wear both sets. It should just make for a way more efficient life in solo play, which I'm hoping is enough to move the needle to bridge the gap between solo and group. And of course, they could always do more. I'm on this campaign for them to like help out with experience as well. But even this is going to be great because it just means you're going to guaranteedly farm more keys for each Greater Rift as a solo player. More DBs for more crafting, like all sorts of stuff that's just going to be really nice. And there's even pushing and speed Greater Rifting implications here too, with the Nemesis Bracers, Flavor of Time, just for this very short list of powers that we have here. Dred, I want to ask you, did you think that the list was fine, concise, wished it was bigger? What were your thoughts when you first saw it?
Of what I'm assuming the items that would actually work for you if they were on the follower.
Yeah, for Emanate.
I mean, I was watching the Dankshari podcast, and when they came up there, I tend to feel how some of the guys on there felt that they had to start somewhere. So they probably were like, all right, what are the most common items? Like Nemesis is an easy one to throw out there. Gold Wrap, stuff like that. It's tough because we're getting to like weird areas, and I was just thinking about one in particular. Now we all think it wouldn't work. However, what's going to happen with Unity? If Unity may not be on there, but like that's a weird case, because if Unity works for you, would it also work for the follower? And then you just need a token, so you have, in that case, you only need to have the one Unity. It works for you, works for the follower, and then you have the Do Not Die token. So it actually takes that what was originally a glitch that they just said, and we'll go with it, and they just continue shortening it up. So there's gonna be a lot of incremental test cases that we're gonna do on the PTR to make sure that works. And there was also something else I was thinking about, kind of leading into the other part of Revamp, which was the skill revamp, which was like, who would have thought they would even go back to the skills and revamp them, let alone doing what they did with the gear, which was, there's a lot of enticing reasons to pick each one of the followers now. It's not just auto default to Templar. But when you take that in a vacuum and you think, okay, you know what? Maybe my Demon Hunter, I want The Enchantress, for whatever reason. Since those skills scale off being the followers main stat, you have to get intel gear now. We don't, the PTR isn't live, we don't know what the values are, for the min and the maximum percentage value. But I wouldn't consider multiplayer or groups left out in the cold, because it still may be beneficial for the first week, 2 or 3 to be in a very blended group and gear sharing like there's no tomorrow to get all your followers up, and then you can kind of go on your solo crusade at a certain point, which in my initial kind of knee-jerk reaction saying that, I feel is actually fine, because it gives a totally different dynamic purpose to grouping up. It's legitimately refreshed the gear hunt for a new purpose, and it's encouraged in play. It's almost like a weird natural gear hunt refresh, and it's strange that we're getting it almost 10 years into this game.
Right. Well, and it's also coupled with the leaderboards, which we haven't even talked about yet. And it's one of my most exciting moments. So you actually just introduced something that I hadn't thought about yet, which is that we do care about the main stat on the items now, because I can tell you so many times as a demon hunter, I'm throwing tons of deck stuff at my Templar, just because I'm like, well, I just want the power, I just want the effect. I don't really care about the stats besides like attack speed, maybe some cooldown. But now I could actually see like I'll play a DH and then make a Crusader, go roll all the follower items on the Crusader so strength pops up as a main stat. And I guess at that point I'd have to hope everything else was right so I could re-roll the main stat, So that's kind of an interesting side effect of this.
I wonder if, because they all have somewhat, useful properties for pretty much any class, that if you might see them kind of like just gravitate towards whichever one, shares your class's main stat, just because it's going to be easier to max out those bonuses.
That's an interesting point. So the way I like to try to find patterns, like we were talking about in the pre-show. And to me, the way I was analyzing the followers a bit is that they still seem to, I guess if you ever thought that there was like this is their express purpose, the Templars always seem to be like the most defensive, right? So people have always gone with that in that case, and also the fact that he's a melee character, so you can kind of better maneuver him around, if you will, by teleporting him around and know what he's going to attack and have enemies come around. And then Enchantress was more for like if you want breakpoints, because she has attack speed, but maybe a bit more offensive oriented. And then Scoundrel just wasn't used.
Yeah.
But now it kind of feels like they've really keyed into the Scoundrel being super offensive, like with that rework for I think Vanish, or one of the skills got turned into this crazy thing where he launches out a cloud, and then it's a 20-yard radius. Within that radius, any monsters in there will be 100% crit for like up to like 10 seconds or something like that. So it's really amplifying offensive abilities from there. And then but you did mention they all do have some aspects that are the same, like damage amplification, some slows or stuns, and every one of them now is a cheat death as well. It's pretty nutty.
It's pretty cool. And so it's more of it's more options on how you're going to go through and build your character. And while it is another form of power creep, it's a power creep that literally only affects solo play. Like, this really doesn't have any ramifications on group play besides maybe increasing the rate with which you get power in solo play when you're not with your main group. So if you're not like going through with your group and doing rat runs or something like that, you gain a little bit more benefit. You're clearing a little bit faster. You're going a little bit higher in your GRs when you're playing solo. But for like kind of like the solo self-found, this is huge. Like, this is a huge power increase. For anyone that's going about playing the game just single player majority of the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say good luck to everyone, including myself, on your inventory management and keeping your armory straight at this point.
Oh, that's actually something I didn't even think about. How is the armory going to affect, your followers? It's probably not. Yeah,
It probably not.
Right.
So you're gonna have to deal with your followers. At least at this point, your followers are based off your actual individual character, so that's not so much the issue. What may be more of an issue is having like a solo god and a group god, because they're going to be probably drastically different. So you're going to have like 2 armor setups for that if you were going to do a solo versus a group god setup, or any class. That was the first one coming off my head.
No.
The one thing I like that's coming back a little bit, assuming that your Greater Rift clears, when you view the details, won't show the follower, since the skills matter a bit more now. I'm sure it'll be like a solved thing relatively quickly, but you can kind of like now have some hidden tech. Like, oh, did they use the Enchantress? Did they use the Templar? How'd they get this clear?
Yeah.
It's like one layer of misinformation back now.
Yeah. Oh, I wonder if there's going to be some aspects that you can go through and see. Like, if you go, and the other feature that we really haven't talked about quite yet is that they're revamping the leaderboards to be, you can filter it like by set or no set, so you can see the overall, or if I'm the highest, a Khan's Crusader, you know, and you can go through and like be looking at their character and seeing how they're like 5% off of their CDR breakpoint. Oh, they're using an Enchantress probably, because they can go through and give them that little extra bit of CDR that they need to hit that cap, you know, something along those lines. So yeah, that is interesting that you bring that up, that there maybe is that little bit of hidden tech in there for people that are going through and trying to push some of those leaderboards.
You also just you blew my mind a little bit, because now for like gear checks, when people are like, hey, can you look at my character, you're gonna be like, dude, why you're missing so much stuff? And they're like, but I used the entrance. Like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting. It's a brave new world, but that's the exciting part. And you just mentioned the leaderboards too. We got confirmation that these filters aren't just filters. Like, it actually is a separate leaderboard for the shadow set, for the multi-shot set, for Raymond, Inna. So like the example, the classic example everyone gives is that, like, say you're on Demon Hunter, because we're just using this as an example tonight, and you do the GOD 140, and then you're like, all right, I got my GOD clear, this is also my best overall DH clear. I go and I do a shadow 120. Normally that doesn't show up anywhere because you've already cleared much higher than that. Leaderboards wouldn't update because they wouldn't register that as a new clear. The new system actually takes that clear and posts it on the shadow leaderboard.
Nice.
Good, yeah, because that kind of came up, and like SVR did his logic into it. I'm like, yeah, that's probably how it's gonna work, and then, you know, that back channel asking and everything. So it's good to know that it's confirmed that it does work that way, because then it's like, oh, as like we're all saying, it's like, okay, so like we're on like fourth quarter, 1 yard down away from that SSF dream that everyone wants, and it's like we're almost there.
So close.
And who knows, maybe doing this, if this is a success and this actually incurs further engagement this season, and the community just keep on pounding the pavement on like try to figure out a way to make SSF a mode, whether it's a mode or it's just something you kind of like check in the options, however they have to do it, that would be amazing, because then it's like, okay, we won the battle in Diablo 3, can we carry that battle forward and make sure it's a thing from day one in Diablo 4?
I think I had just said to Tuba, like, I'm gonna laugh so hard if D3 gets SSF and D4 doesn't. How did this happen?
Like, laugh or cry, because I'm big realist.
I think the answer is yes on that one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, but it's there are some costs to this, because it doesn't really sound like a lot. Oh, they're adding more items to the follower, and your follower items can now give your character buffs, and they're adding in some separate leaderboards or whatever. But like, you have to appreciate just how much extra coding would have to go into this, of expanding out like equipment slots on the follower, and then having like the follower items. I almost wonder if the actual tech behind it isn't that you're equipping items on the follower, but they're giving you like a second bracer slot on your character, but with checks that will only give you the legendary ability, none of the stat bonuses, and only the legendary ability, but only specific ones. You know, how they're going through and coding it in the background.
Sounds like the cube, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
exactly. I think, yeah.
More or less. I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow took the cube code and just altered it, because like you going through what you just said, it seems that may be the most pragmatic thing for them to do. Take what works and just hopefully alter it, and it works. Cross fingers it doesn't break the first time they put it in the PTR.
The intriguing part is that it does have sets, which we don't have in the cube, because they will have to show that Kane's is active on the follower and stuff. So to me, it's just really intriguing they got that to work. I thought the direction you were going with this, Nine, was that because of this is the seasonal theme, which I'm kind of saying in quotes.
Yep.
But something people have noted is that there will technically be no seasonal theme, because this is applying to the base game.
Yeah. It was where I was eventually going to go with it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, as you mentioned, they're really, this season will, you know, the cost of it is this season won't technically have a seasonal theme. You'll just be playing this season because you want the gear reset in that fresh rush for the leaderboards. You know, there will be the standard items for going through and getting Guardian, the cosmetics. They just haven't announced what they are, and apparently they're not going to be on the PTR either.
That's pretty exciting.
Yep. So
first time really that we won't have the preview of everything from PTR.
Yeah, but if it's anything to go through and show with some of the items that we saw, you know, from the BlizzCon collection, like the legendary collection package with the wings, the pet, and the transmog, alongside the D2 resurrected wings and pet, then that's going to be pretty awesome. I don't know if you messed around with like the Mephisto wings from the D2 resurrected yet. But it scratches your back.
I just made a video on that, and I saw it. I was like, what is going on? So cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And these are things that, you know, Vayflare, Kimberly went through, and these are some of the first things that we're getting to see of the of her inclusion onto the team as a technical artist to go and add in, you know, more of these items, more of these cosmetics and such, you know, to the future updates of D3. And it's because they're going and doing these huge system updates where they're ready to tackle like background features and such. It makes me excited for what's going to come in the future.
Definitely. Like it could be the floodgate, or like the, what do they call it? Like the entryway drug or something.
Yeah.
This could be the beginning. Oh, real quick, one thing I did notice on patch notes for PTR that it's very understated is that there's 2 new unique items or things that will be part of the season as well, and it seems separate from what we normally, because they went forward and they mentioned like the pet, getting a pet and stuff for Guardian, but the very first part of that was like 2 unique things, so there could be something additional here as well, and maybe that's them trying to make up for giving you a reason to do seasonal.
I guess I read that as two unique new rewards. I don't know why I had such an issue saying that. And then it says, comma, a portrait frame, comma, and a pet will be granted to players. So is that 2 rewards, a portrait frame, and a pet, or is it 2 rewards, the portrait frame, and the pet? You know,
English. Help us.
Yeah.
Deciphering the patch notes.
Yeah, so I guess when I first read that, I saw it as just we're getting a portrait frame and a pet as we normally do. But now that you go through and mention that, you know, because that would be the standard way to read that would be we're getting 4 things. You know?
Yeah. That's my hope, anyways.
Right?
I always want more.
More is better.
I don't know. At this point, we may just have to get Rod Ferguson to throw a little more shade at Adam to write better.
But you know, in addition to those things, we did get. They're continuing with balances and reworks. You know, the Firebirds in the Rathma set got complete reworks. They function completely differently. The Necromancer's Rathma set is no longer going to be a mage pet build. It's now about buffing Bone Spirit in Army of the Dead through your pets, but your pets will no longer be the ones that are delivering your damage. which is a very interesting take on it. This kind of goes back to some early in Reaper of Souls when they were going through and doing some balances, and they wanted to take power away from passive play, like the sentry turrets in the old Marauder set. They didn't want the turrets doing all of your damage. They wanted interaction from the player. And now you're, kind of the Rathma set, and also just like Lawn Singularity had done, whereas you just kind of you cast Mage and you sit back and then you devour to get your essence back, and then you cast Mage again, and that's all that it is. With this set, it actually is a lot more. It looks like it's going to be a lot more active, but the fact that they're taking the power away from the pets, Lawn Singularity still exists, so you can still play that build. And also you could play, with Lawn Singularity, you could play a better version of that build than what the Rathma set was. So this is just a new playstyle, so I can't wait to go through, try it out.
Did you ever use Bone Spirit, like back in, I guess I should ask for D3, but I'm thinking more, specifically back in D2, was there a Bone Spirit, like, fantasy or builder thing that...
So if you were going through and you were playing a Boner Necromancer, I love that, there was two big ways to play, and it was either you focused everything in Bone Spear or you focused everything in Bone Spirit, and if you got high enough level, you just had it maxed out in both, and you could have a weapon swap for, if you had, the god tier rare item that was +3 necro, +3 poison bone, and then +3 to your skill stat. You could have the weapon swap, which, between them. And it was the Bone Spirit did more damage until you got to some obscene breakpoints with your skill synergies, at which point Bone Spear would just be flat out better, in addition to being multi-target. Because Bone Spirit was your single target, and you could go through and like one-shot mobs as long as they weren't magic immune with it. And it was extremely powerful. Bone Spear might take a couple of shots, but was AoE. But there were ways that you could break it. Like there was the old bug where if you were wearing the Marrow Walkers, which gave you charges of a level 22 Bone Prison, but when you equipped it, it was an effect that you had 22 ranks in Bone Prison, and it gave the synergy bonuses, so long as you did not have a single point in Bone Prison. And so you could, so it gave you 22 extra synergy points that you could then put into another Bone skill, and at that point push Bone Spear above the damage rank of Bone Spirit, because it scaled better.
Imagine having all that D2 knowledge. I wonder if it'll ever be useful again.
I don't know. I don't. Do you think they'll ever do anything with D2?
I don't know.
You think those rumors of the D2 remake are true?
Who can really say?
Who can say? I guess. Yeah. We'll talk about. We can talk about that later in the episode. We'll see.
Maybe.
But yeah, a Firebirds remake. I think I saw Dainty on Twitter saying that Firebirds has probably been the most changed set throughout the history of Diablo, because they just could never make it work.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and so it's receiving yet another rework. They're nerfing, they're nerfing God for the Demon Hunters. So
Wait a second. What if the whole purpose of the Firebird set is to just be consistently reworked because it's like supposed to represent a phoenix that just keeps dying and being remade?
It's a meme of itself.
It is. It's beautiful. Leviathan, watch out! I think the snipers are being dispatched at this point. You figured it out. The
SVR.
Illuminati.
Oh my god. So far, mission success.
Yeah. But yeah, there's just some other they're nerfing Mondanugus again. And it's still probably the best Witch Doctor set after its third straight nerf.
It reminds me of the AoV nerfs. Like they keep trying to bring that down, but it's still at the top of Crusader. And probably the same case here with Mundanugu. And even God, we're definitely lamenting that because it's quite the heavy hit. And some people, I think rightfully so, are thinking that other Hungering Arrow setups are going to take the top of the tier instead, because the items that support God with Hungering Arrow are really strong, but
Mhm.
you can also apply them like through Unhallowed Essence, which can do stuff with generators. So you just transfer it over there. So it's
Mm.
like Hungering Arrow isn't going away, but you're also losing just like an entire set to play potentially. So I
Mhm.
hope PTR will bring about some reasonable testing, and then they'll realize maybe, hey, we can bring this back up a little bit so the set's not completely dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blackthorn's buff?
Never saw that coming.
Yeah, definitely didn't see that one coming. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's more of like a buff to lawn builds, because now you can get elemental damage, on an item that will roll for your class if you're not a witch doctor. So you don't have to go through and get a witch doctor just to spend blood shards to try and get swampland waiters. You can just roll for blackthorns to get the elemental fix that you want for your class. If you're not using your pant slot for anything else.
It's a good thing that things of like small percentages don't really get tracked, because I guess the amount of witch doctors being made will pretty much look the same, like less than 1%.
It is. I mean, it's. I think I've said this when we were talking about like the Diablo 4 classes and such. I think it was maybe on the Danctuary episode or something. Witch Doctor is just like one of the least popular classes in all of Diablo. So, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, that without going too deep into things, and we've got a lot to talk about. That pretty much covers up all of the Diablo 3 stuff. Is there anything else before we move on that you wanted to mention? Any other hot takes? How do you feel that we did on our guesses going into BlizzCon?
Yeah, I think we kind of, from the past learnings or the past sort of herding of information, we got the D3 one pretty much right, because we've seen this pattern before where they have kind of tucked away some new stuff about D3 in blog posts. So I think that it wasn't too hard to predict, but I'm just glad that we were right in that there was information, because we also could have been wrong and they just said nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
The radio silence, tumbleweeds going through the game. Like, well, this is how it's gonna be.
Yep.
They got double goblins.
Yay! Yay!
So yeah, I'm happy.
Yep. And there was one other prediction that I had forgotten. I had said that the hidden transmog for Diablo 3 from the package would be related to the announcements at BlizzCon.
Ah, nailed it.
Yep. And it was, because it was the Dark Wanderer. Oh, spoilers.
Uh-oh.
But
Who's
yeah,
that?
I don't some guy. I think that's the main character in Halo.
He got a tan and just walks around.
Yeah. The next topic of predictions, the Blizzard Netflix series, or the Diablo Netflix series. I brought it up and then spent 8 minutes talking about why it would never happen.
Typical.
Yep. And so there you go. It didn't happen, so I was right. Go me. I brought that one up. Just so that way I could up my average just a little bit.
Play. So you can have the satisfaction of shooting it down.
Exactly.
This guy's cooking the books.
Hey, if you're the one writing them, why not? So, Diablo Immortal. So this is the one that we had a lot of high expectations going into for the BlizzCon Online, and might be probably the one source that would be kind of like the biggest letdown in the convention. Like, obviously, letdown is a little bit of a harsh word, because it's like we got such awesome news from BlizzCon Online, but it was a bit lacking. And so, for some of these predictions, I said I think that we're going to get a release window, but not a hard release date. That we'll probably get a firm date for the beta. We'll get some more info on the two remaining classes, the Crusader and the Necromancer. I made some predictions on that they might have like some class roles and might tie into an announcement of some form of endgame. Levy, you went through and said it's going to be a whirlwind of change compared to past coverage. We're going to get the release date, and it's going to be September 21st.
Oh yeah, you got
Yeah, and then you subsequently went on to force both Dredd and myself to give hard release dates for it. We both went through and mentioned that we're giving you this date, but we don't believe it.
Exactly.
And then you also said that we would get a hard date for the beginning of testing. Dredd, you also said that we would be getting a date for specifically a closed beta, and that it was going to be 2 to 4 weeks after BlizzCon. And that
Like closed beta?
you said closed beta 2 to 4 weeks after BlizzCon. Not testing, not another alpha step. You said closed beta.
God, that was stupid.
And that you also said that we would keep our characters going in our previous characters that we had leveled in the technical alpha, and we'd be able to carry those characters into the further steps of testing. And the only reason why I go through and I bring that prediction up was because they had specifically said that they're going to wipe everything.
Because you don't love me.
And then what was it? One of the final wrap up takes was after Leviathan had forced us all to give our dates as to what we went through and said. I said that they're probably not going to announce a release date, and we're all going to be wrong.
Well,
we were wrong on everything.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Dredd could technically, I want to salvage this. Dredd could technically still be right.
He could
in 2 to 4 weeks.
In 2 to 4 weeks, Dredd could still possibly be right. And it was something that we had talked about without really going into the predictions and stuff, but it was something that we went through and talked about, though not in relation to Immortal, because we were going and talking about Immortal was going to get prime billing at BlizzCon, and it gets even better when we get into the next topic. But we were.
Well, if I could defend myself just a little bit,
Okay.
just a little bit. My thought was Diablo 4 is going to be the main, before another Diablo game kind of swooped in.
Mhm.
That Diablo 4 was going to be kind of like the star, while Diablo Immortal was still going to kind of be cheap seats.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off. But that actually is something in our next point.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
I'll stop.
Yeah, no, you because you actually did make that point.
Reclaim your time. Reclaim your time.
But yeah. So
yeah, we were mad wrong, yeah.
Mad wrong because what was it that we got? Dredd, if you want to go through and tell the lovely people at home, if you somehow missed the BlizzCon coverage, or even if you didn't miss the BlizzCon coverage, you might have missed the Immortal coverage.
Mm-hmm. So just talking about like the Immortal coverage in general.
Yeah, what was it that they talked about? What did we learn at BlizzCon?
It's like it's one of those things when you're dealing with Julian and Wyatt specifically, not that all the developers don't give information, but like Wyatt and Julian have a way of like, and I've kind of like styled myself after them doing my own stuff. It's like they have a way of giving like a 10-minute answer, and there is something new in there, but you have to be paying attention. So there was some really good philosophies. There was some clearing up of like, okay, this system. Okay, when we brought up in our group Q&As and the general Diablo Q&A, which was an interesting experience of itself. We should talk about that for a minute if we have the time. It was basically, the main panel was just a wrap up between, I think it was Khalib and Wyatt. God help me if I'm not remembering it right. And Bloodshed was hosting, and it was pretty much a review of Alpha. What did it be like? What didn't we like? What systems felt like? How the game felt like a Diablo game, and how it felt like a good game in general. It was a very generalized review. There really wasn't too much, bombshell news. There were a few good learning points, a few good things to look forward to in the future, a few time frames to be looking in the future for when we should be expecting that next round of alpha. What should we be expecting in those? What's left to test? Why is Infamous Line? There's more testing ahead of us than there is behind us.
Uh-huh.
But there really wasn't anything in summation that was like, fuck yeah, we're gonna have the Necromancer next test. No, there was nothing. There was nothing like that. So, but if you went through the Q&As and if anyone waves your hand, transcribed all the group interviews that weren't necessarily public, you can go through them. You can definitely pick out probably half a dozen new-ish or good philosophical takeaways that just kept on making me more at ease and more pumped and hyped for the game as we get closer and closer to those next testing phases.
Yep. Which basically is like kind of like go through and sum it up. We didn't really. It was more of a retrospective of the technical alpha than it was any real additional info. They teased some things, like additional testing phases, plural. That there's going to be additional. There's going to be multiple testing phases that are still ahead of us.
And it sounded like maybe each of the classes we haven't seen yet would be like 1-in-1, like one testing phase with Necro, one testing phase with Crusader, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they at least the way that they specifically phrased it is like the next testing phase would include one of the two remaining classes, and that we weren't going to get them both at the same time. Though we might get them both, later in further testing, but they definitely were not going to. They weren't going to drop both of them at once.
Which like for like a 15-second tangent, I feel is a very smart thing to do, because I wouldn't normally think about this until, I don't know, someone gave this revelation. It's actually smart to do one class and then do the other one. So if people want to play something new, they only have one option. It's not like people can be like, oh, I don't like the Necromancer, so I'll play a Crusader, or vice versa. It's like, no, this is the new shit. You're going to be able to play it this alpha, so you better play it now. So it creates a sense of urgency. More people play it, more people test it. And I hope that Necromancer is the first one, because since it's going to have summons, it's kind of like the character and its pets, so that may take a little bit more tuning. So I hope through the order of operations that their development time has allowed them, that it happens to be the Necromancer, just so it gets that extra round of testing it, then the Crusader goes. But I don't want to tangent too much, because we still got so much more to go through.
Yeah, I mean, we did learn a couple of new things. There was at least confirmation, because I remember during the technical alpha there was some questions around PvP, because that had, the Biofin arena had become quite popular with the higher end players, because it was guaranteed legendaries, and so it was a very contested point. It was fulfilling its purpose, without a doubt in that respect. But they weren't very forthcoming with additional details on what PvP was going to take in Immortal, besides not an esport. But now we have, from the Diablo Q&A on day 2, we got confirmation that there is going to be these kinds of I want to phrase it specifically, because it was kind of a specific answer, that it was, group PvP. And so that there would be some scenarios. I think the example that was given was like guild versus guild PvP. I want to say mass battle PvP, but that might give the wrong inclination, when it could just end up being, 5-on-5 or 5-on-5-on-5-on-5. We don't really know what way it's going to go, but there is going to be some specific group PvP, as well as further hinting that there will be raids in the game. But I asked the question in the group interview that Dredscythe was saying, well, what is a raid in Diablo Immortal? And it was just like, well, it'll be groups, and we won't say how big.
Yeah, and just a quick note on the whole raid thing. I'm actually glad you asked that, because that was a big question I had. Because, when you play WoW and you play Diablo 3, the only real difference between like a WoW dungeon and a Diablo 3 Rift is the Diablo 3 Rift has one Rift Guardian at the end, instead of having one at 25, 50, and 75%. That's really the only main difference style-wise. like system wise. So I was actually happy you asked that because, and unfortunately, like you said, we didn't really get a answer. But yeah, that's probably one of the last lingering questions that I still have to look at for answers on going forward.
I do want to say one thing two things in defense of the panel. And so I guess I'll start out with kind of the negative, which is that I think the panel wouldn't have come under as much scrutiny. Well, here's the thing too. BlizzCon in general, you're always kind of expecting if something comes up, there's like a hype reason for it to come up. So I think that was a little bit of some of the people's kind of like
managing expectations.
Yeah. And the fact that like they mentioned Immortal, but it wasn't very forthcoming with like new stuff. The fact that it was, like you mentioned, more of a retrospective, and the way that it was titled as well, which was Technical Alpha and Beyond. And I think one of the most famous things I've been repeating, because Greg mentioned it, I thought it was so well put, was they hit the Technical Alpha and they kind of missed the Beyond. But I will say, for the defense, to me, that panel was the most reminiscent of 1 year of BlizzCon. I think it was like 2017 or 2018. I think it was 17, where I, luckily, and a couple of other community members got to do a panel that was like just community centric. And to me, that was kind of this panel, because there was so much footage from the community, and the fact that they used Bloodshed as the interviewer rather than just like a CM or a face from Blizzard. It just gave it that like for us bias kind of feel, which I thought was really cool. It was just nice to see, like, you know, they were literally taking like people's streams, like highlights from their gameplay footage, stuff like that. So at least from that aspect, I liked that it was like a celebration of the people that had gotten into test and things like that. But again, information wise, you know, a little lacking, sadly.
Yeah, a little light.
Yeah, I'll agree with what you said, Levi. Both fronts.
Yep. You know, and I think this will tie into something that we discussed in our next topic. Was something that we had brought up on the last episode, was news coverage, and that you have to have more of like kind of like a concise message, and you have to be conservative with all the things that you're going and talking about. And this was one of the ones that we had gotten wrong, because we'd all expected Diablo 4 was going to be the headliner, and then Immortal was going to be the opener, and then everything else was going to be kind of like the tertiary things that we're going to go through, or maybe would be the coming soon attraction, like the trailer beforehand. That, you know, it was we kind of gotten that order wrong. And unless anybody has anything else to bring up on Immortal, we're going to go through and move on to the Diablo 2 remake or remaster.
Bold's take two.
Yep.
Before March is over, we will get concrete news about Immortal that is tasty.
I could, you know, just the way that they were going through and talking that we're going to get more information soon, and we're going to see the more phases of testing, while tying in with this whole thing that they don't want to cross, they don't want to cross messages and have something attributed to Diablo Immortal that they announced for 4, or something they announced for 4 attributed to Diablo Immortal. I could see that. Right. I could 100% in agreement with you that we'll have more Immortal news before the month is over. Or before March is over, since we're still in February, technically.
I second the motion.
All right. Motion is passed. And so...
Student government again.
There
will be pizza in the cafeteria.
Ooh, I'm away. Just please no pineapple. But so yeah, the Diablo 2 Resurrected, the Diablo 2 remaster, not remake, remaster, and that's an important distinction, was kind of like, you know, rivaled Diablo 4 with being the main event, you know, for BlizzCon. That was like one of those really big things. I want to say it had pretty much equal representation along with everything that they talked about with Diablo 4, and completely overshadowed, you know, what they were going through and announcing with Diablo Immortal, which is the exact opposite of what we had predicted. I will say this, that there was a little tiny thing that I did get correct. I said that they were going to announce a Blackthorn remaster.
Oh my goodness!
I'm taking that. I am taking that and running with it.
You get like 0.1 of a point.
That's fine. That's 0.1 higher. I'm going for it.
Mm-hmm.
But some of my other predictions are going to make the that they should. I guess this wasn't technically a prediction. This was more of a want. That they should leave the original D2 separate in playable. Should people not want to play the remake, that they can always go back to the original Diablo 2, and that's something that they did. In essence, because they wanted to leave the support for all of the mods and the community stuff, and so they're not touching the original Diablo 2, and the Diablo 2 Resurrected will be an entirely different install. So it's not going to be like Warcraft 3 Reforged, where you load up your original Frozen Throne and all of a sudden you're playing on a new engine with all of the new problems. I did also make the take that they're probably going to make some changes to the early game, like removing the stamina bar to make it more accessible, the auto gold pickup range, and then also I agreed with Dred's prediction that it's just going to be I agreed with Dred's prediction, and we'll get to Dred's prediction in a little bit, but then Leviathan, you said that they would make that they would make some changes to the game, and that you agreed that they would probably make some quality of life things like auto go pickup range, but they would all be moddable, so there were things that you could turn off and on.
Ooh.
And there you go, and that is, they did announce that there was going to be auto gold pickup, and you could turn it off if you wanted, or the entire redid graphics engine you can even toggle in game off and on if you wanted to just play the original, because of the way that they're making it. And you also agreed with Dred's take on how the game itself would be released. And Dred, your only prediction for Diablo 2 was that it was just going to come up, it was going to show the trailer, and then it would say Diablo 2 Resurrected coming 2022, and then that's it.
Oh.
And that there was not going to be any other announcements, no other talks. It was going to be like a blog post at most, and that it was just a trailer coming 2022. And that would be the long and the short of it. But to be fair, we both agreed with Dred. We said that it was going to be a trailer, an announcement. It's not going to be coming anytime soon, and that Immortal was going to take center stage after Diablo 4 in terms of the announcements at BlizzCon.
Yeah, the Immortal is really what threw the kink in like everything else, the ripple effects of other predictions. Mm-hmm. I never anticipated, because we are going on this idea that because of the investor call and the notes we got from that Immortal is going to come out in 2021. Mm-hmm. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, they won't saturate the market with double Diablo product in 1 year, so why would they ever release another Diablo game, even if it's close to ready, within that same like time frame? But if it stands to reason, we're actually getting 2 Diablo games this year, because we did get the 2021 mark on Resurrected.
Yep, that we did. And I have to say, I expected a remake. I did not expect a remaster. And, because I expected that they were going to do some quality of life changes beyond the ones that they've announced in the game, with like the auto gold pickup, with some more substantial things like removing the stamina bar and things of that nature. And now they are adding like a shared stash space that you can share across your character.
Bigger stash in general. Yeah,
bigger stash. You can link items in chat. You're gonna have an actual UI for your friends list and chat commands and stuff within the game. Better BattleNet, lobbies and being able to like link the items so someone can click it in chat in an entirely different game and open it up and see what it is that you're trying to trade. Things where you're no longer difficulty locked to game creation and viewing. They
shorter
made
ladders.
Yeah, and so it's a whole bunch of things that they're going through, and they are making better. But the entirety of Diablo 2 Resurrected actually just acts as a layer of code that works on top of the original game. The whole original game of Diablo 2 is running in the background, and they added more or less just a render engine on top of it to give the 3D effects and the dynamic lighting and such. And there was some really interesting talk about how they were going and doing it, where the game itself is kind of like hard locked at like 24 frames, and that their render engine is filling in everything else for modern screens, whether it be like the 60 FPS, or even I think that there was mentioned potentially support for 144 megahertz monitors and such. So there's a lot going on there, but the game itself is going to be true to Diablo 2.
Yep. And also coming to consoles, which I guess we never even thought to like make a prediction on that, but like that was a big surprise too. Switch, PS4, Xbox, like that's pretty crazy. They're gonna make so much money on this game. It's actually insane.
Which is one of those ones that makes me wonder if they're going to go through all the trouble to make Diablo 2 Resurrected on the console in addition to PC. How large is the console user base for Diablo 3?
Oh, it's gotta be big.
When you're going through...
market.
There's a metric there that they're going and they're looking at and saying, it is worth the investment to make this game work on console.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, like the three of us know this, but like Diablo has proven itself to be one of the most long-standing, long-lasting Blizzard IPs, and it's probably the most flexible because it started out on the PC. It had a console version, PlayStation.
And Neinball played first.
Yeah, 9. You played it back then.
Yeah, I hated it, but I did. That was my first experience with Diablo 1 was on the PlayStation.
I mean, PlayStation 3 and Xbox One, like what, 2 console generations now back is when Diablo brought Blizzard back to consoles. It preceded Overwatch. It preceded a couple of others at this point. And it's just been, a groundswell of support from the console players that I think as PC players, like, we see, but, like, they're always kind of hidden. You go to Reddit, if you're not in the right Reddits, like, they poke up every once in a while, but, like, we only kind of see the PC players most of the time. But I think Blizzard's mentality now is that if their game can be done and worked on a console, it's gonna go to console. Like, that's probably in the group of like the primary conceptual questions when they think about an IP. It's like, okay, what is the game? What is it gonna do? What platforms are we gonna put it on? Because especially when you think about, jumping back a little bit with Immortal being on the phone, that's something that they've saved multiple times, multiple places, and over the last year or two. Like, that's the question. Like, it's almost like we're surprised by the Diablo 2 Resurrected coming to consoles, but I think going forward we shouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the announcement that Diablo 4 is coming to consoles and it's being developed with consoles in mind from the ground up. And it's not even just like it's going to be a simple port. Like, these people, the team over at Vicarious Visions obviously care, like, a lot. Because
that was very evident.
Yeah, because, it's like when they go through and you're going to bring it to consoles, well, a controller has more than 2 buttons, that the PC version has. But they thought of that. And so that if you're playing something like a Paladin and you have your auras, that if you have your aura mapped, you're going to have like your 2 active buttons and then like your 2 secondary buttons. And so your aura will only work when it's on like the active button. And when you press one of the secondaries, because in the PC version, you can swap your aura off to press an active skill and then swap back to the aura so it will turn off for a second. When you press that kind of like secondary button, your aura turns off while the skill animation activates. So you're not actually getting that advantage of having the extra control buttons. It's acting as if you still only have those two active buttons, and you're just hotkeying back and forth between them like you would on PC.
Yeah, there were so many like small callouts of things like that, very like minute attention to detail that you could tell they were very keen on not making any misrepresentations or like losing the true fidelity of what it was like to play D2 and like translating it, like you said, across PC to console. But even just like you mentioned as well, the PC to PC, upgrade with this newer fidelity and such on top. Like it's still the same exact game, which I think like the Mr. Llamas of the world and such will truly appreciate, because there is always that fear that in a remake or a remaster they go too far, get too crazy, and then they kind of lose the essence of what the project was originally.
Yeah, I think just like really the only like thing I can add, because I didn't play Diablo 2, is, and unfortunately through covering I didn't have a chance to actually watch the deep dive panel, but from the Q&A panel and from the group interview, like the example about how the game is run on frames, not on time, and how the render engine was going to be layered on top, as you mentioned, and how that's how they made sure that the base game would still be running at that true I think what was it, 25 frames per second, and so the whole game that's based around that would be left fine. But they used the example of like a bicycle wheel with the spokes, and how they were just putting more spokes in the wheel to fill the animation, but the game was still running at its base FPS, as well as the example that was brought up as about like the auras and the controllers. It was like
Garlic.
Yeah. Team Garlic.
I felt like I wasn't watching a panel as so much as I was getting an education by people who were passionate about a game, who understood what made it tick, and were going to make it right. Like the last example I could come off the top of my head is the colors, how contrast was used, because they had to use that back in the day, because that was the only real way they could do it in the 2D animation, to make sure enemies were distinguishable and distinguishable from each other. And that was a concern with the 3D model with the dynamic lighting, and they said, yes, we're aware of that, and if it's something that's whoever is testing an alpha, bring it up. We want to make sure we hold true to the true Diablo 2 experience. I'm like, so without knowing the game, without playing the game, only going off of that little bit of examples I've given, I can tell these people know their crap.
Oh yeah, no, like going through and talking about like, killing Nightmare Bale and then reloading like a Nightmare character to swap over in order to get like, the Nightmare character, the kind of like the bug in Battle.net to get the Nightmare lobby games again, so that way you can continue to farm Bale for grinding levels before you went into hell. To just all they played Diablo 2. They obviously played a lot of Diablo 2. They knew like the little quirks and mechanisms of the game and such. So they were speaking to it at a very high level. These aren't just people that were given a project to go through and remake D2. They were players. They played this game. They loved this game. And the energy and the passion was obviously there.
And one other thing I did want to bring up, because Dred quickly mentioned it, is that right now, if you are listening to this and you're like insanely interested in D2 Resurrected, you probably already know this, but the game will be in technical alpha, and we actually don't have a date on that, so that's something that could also come up in the near future. But you can kind of tick your account to be, hey, pick me active for that. So you go to the website for Diablo 2 Resurrected, make sure you put yourself on that list. And also, you can pre-order it right now. There's cross progression between PC and console, so if you own the game on those multiple platforms, you can continue to make progress and switch over from one to the other and back. Like, that's actually pretty insane. And then I guess last but not least is that oh geez, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. I'm definitely excited. I'm looking forward to it. I would go back and play Diablo 2 every once in a while with like a ladder reset. And it's just, hey, the game already looks impressive, So I can't wait to go and see what they do.
I remember my last point. The other point was that it's going to launch on 1.14, which is the current patch of D2. And this will I can't believe I forgot the most important part. I was going to ask you guys, what do you think about? Maybe it's hard to tell, but one thing that Dredd kind of mentioned was they're offering up like this is still a game in development. So if stuff is wrong, tell us. What do you think about beyond release? Will there be future support for this game? Will there be patches? Will they make updates?
That was the question that they kept getting answered all the time, and the answer was at the moment they're just going to go and release the game as it is, a 114B, and then that's it. But obviously, if what all those people on Reddit have been saying for years, and that D2 is the superior game, and it sells well enough, who knows? You why not? Why not do more? Especially because Diablo 2 in its original state will still exist as a separate product. You can always go back to and play if you wanted to, as well as just like a lot of those features that they mentioned were already toggleable. You can make a character or an expansion character, or maybe an expansion character if you so choose when you go back to play D2 Remaster. But I'd have to say that if this game is successful, and if it's successful as much as the community is hoping or is talking about it will be, they might have to do something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would think like the first couple of patches after the game's releases, there's just the fix little bugs, glitches here or there that just made its way through is inevitable. But yeah, I mean, and Nine, to throw it back to you, how far do you think they would go with new stuff, considering that not thinking like expansion, a new act type deal, but like if they're gonna add stuff, I mean, Ubers is already a thing. Well, there's a lot of kind of that. Like, if they wanted to add like something that would require lore, how do you feel about them apples and everything like that? With all the other games being out after it, the continuity and everything.
Yeah, I mean, they gave themselves a 5-year gap between D2 and Immortal, so that there's still at least some room and stuff that they could go and do there. Especially when you're going through and you're filling in gaps and timelines, there's really no limit to what you can or can't do. You could always just have you could kind of take like the Path of Exile, and you can just they could have you play back through all of the acts to see what the world is like after Ariat exploded. You play through the 5 acts, and then you play back through the 5 acts again. But yeah, I could easily see them going through and making new rune words, introducing new items, because they would do that even years after D2's release. They would drop like an additional item with like a new ladder. There's a lot that they could do as far as future content, between just from something simple as a rune word or an item to a new act or new assets to be added to the game. I don't want to spend too much time hoping and dreaming on that respect, but yeah, there's potentiality. They're leaving the door open.
For sure.
And now moving on to our final game, Diablo 4. There's some big takes in here. There were some heavy takes, and this one's a little bit back and forth. So for the Diablo 4 predictions, starting with myself, we all knew going into it that there would be a new class, but as to what that class would be, we were all like in agreement, that it was going to be some sort of range class, like specifically like Leviathan is a physical range class, Dredscythe bow something class were your exact words. I also was agreed that was probably going to be like the range archetype, but I kind of like took it that it was going to be, say, maybe like a holy or inquisitor range class. It was going to be some sort of like witch hunter and that might feature like as a tie into the Fractured Peaks. No, scratch that. They're going to announce a Necromancer. Was my fallback on my 50-50. Here's a good one. Since Leviathan, I've been irking you with going through and like taking in my small like little tiny predictions here and there.
Oh God, here we go.
I don't think they're going to talk about PvP at all. So there you go.
I'm giving you a -0.1.
That
now.
yeah.
You're taking the other point away.
I am hoping for more info on itemization and affixes. And then also I'm gonna take the win on this one. The pale guy is not Rathma, so just deal with that.
That was not confirmed or denied in this.
100% confirmed. I don't know what you were watching, but anyways, moving on. Leviathan, big brain play. They're gonna hit us with the Hunter reveal. A physical range class, and the hot take is that it's going to be something that we haven't seen yet, but I don't want to believe it. You were going through and saying that you want it to specifically be like the physical range class, but that you think it's going to be a completely different archetype or class that we've never seen before.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
They said rogue instead of hunter.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe I was so right.
Some new zones that we haven't seen yet, running through with a new feature or dungeon. You also is like one of those ones where it's like, what if they announce both classes? You didn't believe it, but you thought it would be nice. It was just an idea that you threw out there, but you yourself didn't believe it. You wanted to see some PvP.
Mm-hmm.
You also thought that they were going to show some of the older systems that they've laid out in previous developer blogs, but with their current updated form. That they were going to be talking about some of the in-game features, and that we were going to see the return of Deckard Cain as a zombie.
Shucks.
Yep. Dread. Bow something class. Got it. You got it. You were really big and wanting to see crafting, and then you also were wanting to see more on trading, but then my counterpoint killed the idea and you retracted it. So there you go. And you said that the pale guy is Rathma, so that's an L on your part.
I feel there's a little bit of shenanigans on that one. Whatever.
Yeah. Who's judging this?
I am. Yeah. So there you go.
Man, this guy's hungry. He's gone power crazy.
Yep. But I think it's like we were all pretty much in agreement that they were going to show us some form of in-game. That we were going to see. We all were in agreement that there was going to be some more looks at the a new zone, as well as some looks into what rifts might be. And then we also were also on board with Dread's idea of wanting to see more about the crafting.
Yeah, so I feel like if we're grading ourselves, kind of like a B minus maybe, because we got the class reveal pretty much on target. I think one thing we didn't anticipate was that they would dive deeper into the class reveal and give us systems around the class and stuff like that. That surely could have been something we could have said, but I guess none of us kind of thought about that. Because I think in my head, when I thought of the class reveal, it would just be all glitz and glamour, but no keen detail. But we actually got far more detail on it than I was expecting.
Oh yeah.
And I will say that I was maybe shockingly is not the quite right word, but I was pleasantly surprised that they decided to not only incorporate the ranged sort of archetype, but also give it another flavor with melee included in there. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll let you go first on the road because I'll say my stuff, but then I'm gonna kind of lead into speculation.
Okay.
A little bit.
I have to say that when the setting was taking place in the church, I was like, oh shit. Oh, am I right? And then, it ended up not being, but I was kind of close.
Did they do that on purpose?
Did they do it?
I think they tried to debate us.
I think so. I'm in agreement with that one, that they wanted to go through and throw things off. as to what it was going to be with being in the church. But then it was a great contrast, with the actual character itself, because there wasn't a lot to the rogue in Diablo 1. You could cast the clear sight and stuff like that, and that was pretty much like what they did. But seeing the rogue actually fleshed out, as well as building upon the fact that it's not just the Sisters of the All-Seeing Eye from Diablo 1, Diablo 2, and that there are a lot of other factions that fall into this rogue archetype, and that there's going to be like the 3 different specializations for the rogue, and there's going to be quests tied around them to explore those factions that will unlock the specializations that you can use on your rogue. And so I believe they said that there's the 3 organizations that you can go and quest that you can kind of like respec your rogue to kind of like train your abilities around. And it was like one where it was like the focus on like shadow skills, like the shadow realm. The other one was exposed weakness, so that way. And the other one was, I think it was combo points.
Yep.
Was the 3 specific ones. And I'm not confusing, because it was a blur going through and getting so much information on so many Diablo games that they wasn't like a core feature of the rogue, and that those were the actual things that you could change. So you have classes within classes.
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of funny. Minion, who's like a long-standing member of our community, was saying like, that sounds like ascendancies from PoE, and I was like, what if they do this for every class? And like, we have ascendancies, like, is this the sort of tri-class subclass system that we have seen introduced and gone very far and well in PoE coming to D4? But I guess as far as I could tell, they didn't necessarily say that they won't have things like that for future classes or some of the other classes, because they may go back and do more to the other classes still. But this did seem to be relatively rogue specific.
Yeah. And that one was actually like sorry, Dred. That one was actually like a really good point, because this is the most fleshed out we've seen any of the class specializations. Like their little like niche ability. Like this is the only one that we can go through. Like we've seen, there's the arsenal system, there was shape-shifting, the sorceress didn't have anything, and then the last dev update they showed the sorceress has like that enchanting ability. But when you look at this, like is this what all the classes will have?
Yeah.
That would be impressive.
Yeah, because I'll do a small remark on the rogue, but I'll leave a little bit after if either one of you have further comments. But just to remark, because if you would have to kind of do like a 60-second thing of like what happened at BlizzCon and Diablo, like you probably would have missed the depth, as we've been stating with the rogue, because it's like, okay, the rogue, it has melee and range, so and it can go seamlessly between them. You don't have to worry about swapping weapons out, because you carry your 2 one-handers and you carry your range on you at all times. It's kind of like a mini arsenal system, if you want to think about it that way, from the barbarian. So you always have those on there. You can mix your melee and range skills on your bar. You don't have to worry about that. It's kind of like your druid, where seamlessly shapeshift going through that. And then on top of that, you have the combo points, the shadow realm, or the exploit weakness, which is kind of like the upper level tier specialization. But then you have the immune system on top of that. And the further and further they were describing it, whether you think this is a negative connotation or not, me personally was thinking of old rogues from like vanilla World of Warcraft. It was like you had like your talents, so you were either really stealthy or really combat, but on top of that you had the poisons that you would apply to your weapon that gave you a little bit more of a flair, and like it really helped define what rogue you were. So it seems like they're really doubling down on like that specialization. Like, do you really want to be that stealthy kind of rogue and like maybe hit from afar, or do you just want to be in it and just eviscerate your enemies like the guy in the trailer?
Yeah.
He dig knives in a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper.
That's actually like a really great point, because what are you gonna be? I'm a melee poison shadow step rogue. You know, I'm a hybrid combo, you know, shadow rogue. You know.
Yeah, it reminds me of like in, was it biology, I think, with the Punnett squares. You kind of have like the things on
Yeah.
one side, so you've got your specializations
Yeah.
here. You've got melee range. I guess you need another thing now for like your imbue, and then all the different possible combinations. Like this does, you guys are definitely getting it right. That I think this is by far the most fleshed out, the most intriguing class that we've seen, and I have been saying that I think this is probably like the gold standard, because now this is probably the class that was developed maybe the most recently, or last at least in their kind of list of stuff. So I would not be surprised if, you know, we go back and see in the future further iteration on the other ones to make those systems more unique, to make the arsenal system like Rogue, like you said, stole the arsenal system now.
Right?
It's a thief. It literally took it.
Because what there is really no difference between the arsenal system and the rogue. You know, just it's like the barbarian can just has a choice to swap in a different weapon, you know, if he so chooses for one of his skills, instead of the rogue being hard locked to just one melee, one range. But it also I know that you do still have one further point that you want to make, Dread, but one other thing that I want to bring up is that we have like a little bit further, more in depth, that your elemental type of damage that you deal with your character is also still going to have an impact with your class.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just that the frost spells from the sorceress have chill effects to freeze over a monster. When the rogue imbues their skills with those frost effects, it also adds chill stacks, and it chill stacks that stack with other classes to freeze them faster. Or the fact that if they imbue it with poison, they have a dot, and if they die with the dot, they leave a poison puddle that continues to do damage to other enemies around them. And I might have missed it, but did they say anything about this new shadow elemental type, or what bonuses that might have?
Yeah, so that was part of the Q&A. I got to ask a question on Shadow Element, because I was like, this seems to be kind of the trope or one of the mainstays of the rogue. So I was like, what do they do? Like, and I also asked generally about ailments as well. And like you mentioned just now, you know, there are effects for each of the different elements. Shadow, as far as Joe Shelley explained it, when imbued with the rogue, so I don't know if this is just specific to the rogue or just shadow element in general, it will give attacks that don't normally have AoE, or that like maybe have lesser AoE, an amplified effect of area of effect.
Oh, interesting.
It's specifically with the shadow imbued.
Okay.
Yeah, it gives AoE.
There's a little bit of play there. But I have nothing else to go through and take the floor, because Dread, you've been waiting patiently. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is, like I said, it's kind of like it's like thinking a little bit of tinfoil hatting, but with more grounded thought. We started out with the barbarian, the sorceress, and the druid. Now, mentally bring up the image of that campfire. You know, all the classes seem really well grounded. They seem like they're really part of this rough world that has kind of brought everyone back kind of down the scale. And now with the rogue, I mean, come on. I mean, rogue, you're living in the streets. You're taking what you can, and you go there. And now more than ever, when we ponder about what the next class is going to be, we had the original 3. We saw what the 4th one was, so we see what a trend is. And I think everyone was somewhere between an Amazon and a Paladin, or a Necromancer and a Paladin. And when I look at what the 5th class could be, I don't know if a Necromancer works anymore.
Really?
Because I don't know if Necromancer from thematically could work, especially with everything that's happened in the world since ROS. And 9, I know you were loving it. We actually got confirmation. 9 out of 10 people dead.
Yeah. Which is a huge thing I've been going and talking about that not a lot of people realize, is that, you know, Malthael committed genocide against the human race on Sanctuary at the end of Reaper of Souls. And it's nice to have kind of like, I'm sure that it's not a hard set figure, but yeah, the vast majority of humanity was slaughtered.
Yeah,
you know?
So it's like, with that dead, that would be like, okay, so Necromancers have plenty of bodies to res, they have plenty of fuel, but it's like, I'm thinking like, tonally, what would make sense in a world that's very unforgiving and for that dark tone, not gothic tone, not like Reaper of Souls, but just dark, gritty. Sanctuary just hates you now, and you know it. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, the Inquisitor idea that you had, but I think something more along the lines of a heretic, something like Fallen Herodrum, that were, they were guided by Akarat. The gates of heaven are closed now. They're not receiving the light. They don't turn to demonic ways. They don't go the way of the cultists because they're still repulsed. But they turn to like blood magic and blood rituals. They're basically like the Spanish Inquisition to the highest order of torture and knowing of ways and how to like manipulate people through blood, not and through through ranged means. And I was like, this seems to fit the game tonally so much more than a necromancer at this point, because it deals with blood, it deals with gore, it deals with the whole body horror thing that they're going for. It's very grounded, because like Fallen Herodrum, you look around Sanctuary right now, especially with the Rogue trailer and how everything appears to be, it just seems to fit so much more. So I think you were on the right track, and I think I've been convinced to kind of put the Necromancer on the back burner for now and go down this Heretic or Inquisitor for the next class, because it would be something new as well. They could do, and they could bring in some of the past elements from the Necromancer with blood magic, but kind of work it in a new way. It wouldn't be a summoner class by any means, but they would be able to do some type of stuff with that.
Man, it's so funny because some of the things you're saying, I'm like, I agree, and some of the things you're saying, I'm like, I do not disagree. So I think you're setting up your point really well to counter the Paladins and the Crusaders of the world, because I think they're a bit too hopeful. They're a bit too much of the light. The devil's advocate that you could make, though, is that it would be a good foil to how destitute and dark the world is seeming to be. So you kind of would have like the one, come on guys, like it's gonna be okay kind of person. And that could also fit what some people have been mentioning is like someone that's a bit more party oriented, like buffing up the party, kind of being the flag bearer, the one that helps everybody get along and heal up and stuff like that. So I could see that kind of being on the back burner, like maybe for Hope in the expansion they bring it in or something.
Yeah.
But I still feel like the Necro could fit, because
I mean,
if we're go ahead.
Well,
man.
just as saying is like a lot of the things you were describing is like that's a necromancer.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And it would get the summoner archetype. Like the summoner archetype is missing. Like that is huge. Like no pets in this game would be weird.
And that also goes in point with going back to Riker's like archetype video, like Diablo 2 with the necromancer kind of created that summoner archetype in gaming. They were one of the first ones to really go and like really make that and flesh that out, make it big and such. They weren't the first, but they were one of the ones that kind of has that iconic feel that like other games like Path of Exile and stuff still reference, like that the D2 like style of it.
But to jump back on Dread's side, I do think that this team is ambitious, and I do think they would want to make something new. So I do feel like you could almost marry the two ideas, where like, I don't know if you're beholden to the idea that your Inquisitor can't be a summoner, but it could, the same way that we've been surprised with like the Rogue and how it had like extra stuff, like we were expecting ranged physical, but we didn't expect a melee throw-in. Like maybe your Inquisitor is like a battle mage kind of thing that like deals with blood magic and stuff, but maybe they also find a way to like summon, I don't know, golems or something like that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, just to jump in real quick on that point, because I started thinking this, because Riker was doing, of course, as he always does, like a 5-hour constant talk, and I was really trying to give it some thought. Like, what would be like a prime example, an easy way to describe something that's easy to understand but has a definite new twist? I was like, well, what if whatever class this was, Heretic, Inquisitor, what if they had summons, but it wasn't like they raised something, but they take control of something? So example would be like, you have a pack and there's like an elite in there. Like what if you cast a specific skill on that elite pack and you take control of it, and if after a certain amount of time it whatever, like a growth that happens on it, which won't happen graphically because models and insert C revive for why that won't happen from the DLC, but something just appears over that mob, and they're like, they just start attacking their normally friendly mobs. Or if you want to go further with the idea, like you put something on that mob, and then when they die, you get like minions. Oh god, what's the fallen lunatic ring in Diablo 3 that you usually put in your follower?
The Nagel ring?
Yes. It's like something like that, where like when a monster explodes, all of a sudden you get like 3 or 4 of those kind of like blood horrors that kind of pop out, and then they run and just like kamikaze into like the next mobs.
Mhm.
Like stuff like that, where it's not like true summons, but it's summon like, and it would be unique and different. But then again, it's like, this is just stuff coming off the top of my head. And going back to the holy side of things, like, yes, it would be, you would think story-wise, having something like, a rallier, a crusader, or a paladin, a rally, but I don't think that works. Like, I think the theme is just punishes you. Like, like the World of Sanctuary, it just seems like it just punched the light out of everybody, and everyone's just for themselves. And when we get to PvP later, I don't know if they want to go the route of having a group buffer or group healer, because that would incur a meta. I don't know if they're going down that route. I think they seem to be taking a lot more careful trend with the classes on being, the classes are more or less for themselves. They're not support classes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we talked about, like on Danktuary during BlizzCon, is something that I was willing to concede. As much as I want to see the Necromancer, I think that as a point that you made, Leviathan, that like with this team, you could easily see them going through innovating and creating something new that they can go and they flex their creative muscle. They're obviously like they're doing that with the Rogue, even though they're going through and using its name and like the character design from Diablo 1. There wasn't like any other substance behind the class, and they're going all out with going and fleshing it out. And a certain level can be said for like the sorceress and especially the druid, of being able to do more with it that limitations of like the D2 engine couldn't have done, and make something new. But like the big thing that they're missing is that summoner archetype. And so I would definitely was willing to go through and say I want to see the Necromancer, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did something new. But I am willing to hedge my bet a little bit with saying that it's gonna be like a summoner. And I just want to say that again, like a lot of the things that you're going through and describing, Dread, with like the blood magic and like the summons and the body horror and stuff. It's like, you mean like a blood golem, like a necromancer, and you mean like going through and like debuffing an enemy that will cause it to fight on your side? Oh, you mean like confuse with a necromancer?
D2 knowledge comes at me hard.
I mean, it's in D3.
Well, I mean, specifically confused. Like, you have revive, but in Diablo 2, a necromancer could basically charm an enemy to fight on your side that was still alive, and then after it died, revive it. So the necromancer, their curses, the curse tree was had a lot of depth to it that the D3 necromancer did not have. There's a lot of things that you could manipulate monster AI with dim vision, fear, and confuse that had a lot of depth of combat that it did not have in D3. So, and you never played D2, so I understand that you didn't have that. But those archetypes and stuff that you were saying, yeah, those are there. They've existed inside of Diablo, and it was the Necromancer.
I think like for future episodes, we should have one that I feel like we could probably fill like a good amount of time talking about like what the next class could be, or at least just like what we expect the world of the next game to be, because I feel like there are still more things I want to fight with Dread about on this.
Oh yeah,
but like we're out of time potentially for this.
Yeah, we do want to keep the topic moving, because this is where we're going over predictions, not making new ones.
Right.
But I guess the last thing that I would want to say, that I mean, it definitely, Dread, your idea fits, like you said, with the theme of the world. But I guess the only thing that I would see as far as like the narrative setting would be is you're still the good guy. As far as dark and gloomy, and terrified as the world, you're still supposed to be the hero of Sanctuary.
Well, yeah, that's why I said, like, these group of heretics, inquisitors, whatever they are, they haven't gone full cultist. They've kind of gone their own way.
Yep. But yeah, and of course, like, one of the big things that we're talking about with our predictions, and besides myself, you two, I have to, give the floor over to you guys now, is PvP. They had already announced it at BlizzCon 2019, but they went into a little bit more detail with what PvP was going to take its shape in D4. And because I got this one entirely wrong, Leviathan, would you like to kind of like give a quick synopsis of what, or synopsis, not synapses, of what, two different things entirely. I'm still thinking of like body horror and blood from Dread going on there. One.
You need a moment.
I'm getting hot and bothered because he gave me flashes of the Necro. With what shape PvP is going to be taking in Diablo 3, at least what little bit that they've teased us with so far.
Yes, my synopsis will put PvP into your synapses and make you love PvP. I hope.
I like it.
So, I am a big fan of what they presented with PvP at BlizzCon Online for D4, because it's more than what we have seen in previous games. Certainly more than what we saw in D3. Definitely more than in D2, and we don't yet know the state for Immortal. But in any case, the system that we have here is, we did know prior that there would be PvP zones. We have this open world that we'll be a part of in Diablo 4. So you'll run into random players as you're travailing throughout the land of Sanctuary, and fighting world bosses and stuff. But however, there will be special reserved areas of zones where you can go hostile against other players. And what we learned is that this is because of the influence of Mephisto, to put it into lore terms. There's lots of hatred spawning here from the Lord of Hatred himself. And so you're going to get angry and go in there and fight enemies. There's actually PvE content within the zone, as you would normally be seeing. And when you kill these enemies, you're going to get shards of hatred. Now, these are the currency that you'll be able to turn into nearby vendors at these PvP zones. However, it is a precious commodity that everybody wants. And this is when players will go hostile on you, because as it was explained by Karina Kingdom in the Q&A, you don't have to go hostile originally as soon as you enter the zone. But when you do turn in, I think Joe mentioned, and Dread, definitely hit me up if I'm wrong or clarify anything after I'm done. When you turn in the shards for purification to make them like completely yours and not able to be taken from you if you die, that is a moment of vulnerability. You will be able to be attacked by other players. And that is kind of the idea behind the PvP here, is it's PvEVP in a way that you're going to fight the monsters, get the shards. If you have a lot of shards, someone might try to take you down and take those shards for themselves. Once they're purified, they're yours, and then you spend them at the vendors.
Yeah, I'll do my best to clarify, because I did the transcriptions, and God, I had to listen to them like 2 or 3 times. From what it sounds like, I think you hit everything pretty much correctly. I think Karina said that you can go into the zone and not be hostile. I think once you start attacking mobs and start gathering the shards is when I think that's the gray area. I think
yeah, I'm pretty sure they said that you can go in there and you can farm the shards and such without being hostile.
Yeah,
but
like
But if you have no choice, that when you go through is when you go to purify the shards, you are forced into being hostile and can be attacked by anybody. But
yeah, exactly.
And the whole point of doing that is that the shards are useless. You can't use them as currency unless they've been purified, but you also can't take them out of the zone unless they've been purified. So
yeah,
you can't just Yeah, you can't just go through, farm up a whole bunch, and then go and log back in at 5 o'clock in the morning when no one else is on in order to purify them and to try and cheese the system. You have to do it in that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was trying to get at. It's like it's not like the hardest of hardcore PvP rule sets that could have been in there. There's gonna be that they set a purification event. They show what looks like a shrine that you go up to, and it may be like shrines that are just like randomly in the zone. It may not be a set location. We don't know that. They do purification, and you're vulnerable. Then you get your ass handed to you. And then something, Levi, I didn't know if you actually said, but if you get like enough of these shards before purifying, the game will call you out and alert other players around you. Say, hey, go kill this guy. And if you do, I'll give you a bonus. So like just like that the world being soul crushingly hard on you is even maintained through the PvP experience. And if you're that person that gets called out and you survive the timer, I think they just said generically that you survive the timer, you get a bonus. But if someone does manage to find you, kill you, get their stuff, they get a bonus, and then the cycle of hatred kind of continues.
I'm glad they found a way to bring NBA Jam into Diablo 4, so now we can be on fire. He's on fire.
This is like kind of like a big mechanic that they introduced like in Battle for Azeroth to try and reinvigorate world PvP and World of Warcraft. Because in World of Warcraft, PvP is all like instance and scenario based, and it doesn't really happen organically out in the world. But in BFA, they tried to implement some things. It worked on some, didn't work on others, but they tried to give you incentive to want to go out and participate in PvP out in the world. But in Diablo 3, they're handling that by the PvP is just going to handle out in the world. And if you get on a roll, there's going to be a bounty placed on your head, and everyone's going to come for you. Because one of like the big things with those PvP zones is that it like they're going through and talking about like you're hostile or not hostile, but it didn't really make much sense because even if you weren't toggled for hostile, someone that was toggled could still walk up and attack you, you know, because they had flagged, and so it was just like you're kind of always flagged. So what's the point? You know, it's just if you have two people, I guess maybe it's like one of those signs that is like if you have two people that aren't flagged and we're just killing mobs, that it's like I'm not gonna fuck with you. Well, you stay the hell over there. You know, you just go over there. I'm gonna farm on this side. You farm on that side. You know, just kind of like the head on a swivel, looking out for danger. And then as soon as you go to try and purify your gems, like 3 rogues pop up out of the Shadow Realm and send you to the other dimension.
Well, that's gonna be because so you can party for this too, which is gonna be exciting because I'm also just envisioning that was another aspect of I kind of liked. Oh, we didn't even talk about this. The whole ears like sort of thing that was permeating the Diablo 4 news in general. The cinematic for the rogue,
the noise,
full of disgusting ears, which was calling back to PvP, and then we got the PvP news. The exciting part here is that the rogue seems very well equipped for PvP, because if you go that Shadow Realm specialization, I almost could see like you're kind of doing what you're doing. Maybe one of your specializations is going to be better for farming, like the combo one, just to get some quick farming done. And then you're like, all right, time to settle in for a night of PvP. Then you go do your like specialization to get into Shadow Realm, and you wait for some big burly barb to get all buffed up and become the Archon of Hatred, and then you just Shadow Realm him and 1v1 him down, like away from his party and stuff. It could be so cool.
Yeah, which is, you know, to go through and give a little bit of explanation, one of the things that they had shown with the rogue was like that Shadow Realm is that like when you pop that ability, like you take a couple of the enemies with you that are around you, and then that's it. You are like the only ones that exist in that little instance. So if you're having, and that just adds so much potential for like group PvP, because say, you know, and this is like the Diablo 3 analogy, we have no idea if support builds are going to be a thing or support classes or anything like that, but just, you know, kind of like basing it on information that already exists in a different game. Like what would happen like if you were in a rift and then all of a sudden they took away your monk? You know, you know, It's just, you know, it's not even that the rogue has any chance of going through and killing the support piece, but then now the rest of the group doesn't have their buff. You
You
know,
actually do see this in Greater Rifts, because if someone disconnects, then they have to run back. They can't teleport to the group.
Yeah.
So you actually see groups crumble, like in these rat runs, when like suddenly your Z-Neck's gone. They're like, well, we can't do anything anymore.
Yep.
So imagine that. Like that is like the PvP experience with this.
Yeah, just you got that brief period of time where you gotta fight without something, or you know, you see that one guy dips like a little bit low, you know, before a friend can cast a heal or anything like that. Oh, I'm just gonna Shadow Realm you, and then now it's us, buddy. Let's go. You know.
Your heal has missed. What?
Yeah. I'm sure that there'll be, you know, the ways that you can go through and use it. You pop it off screen and then run into combat when no one's, you know, so they can't see you coming and stuff. And there's all sorts of potentiality.
Mode.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, this should play. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
You can play that on your screen.
And to Nine, you probably have this in your notes, but just to kind of jump there, because there was actually very lengthy, kind of, I would say, open discussion during the group interview where Joe Shelley was delicately dancing around the option of when it pertains to hardcore and PvP. First of all, it was nice knowing that hardcore was actually in the game. Hardcore as a system was definitely in the game because they were talking about it in this context. So I was like, okay, first of all, that's good to know. Second was they weren't, you know, all that set if hardcore PvP would be permadeath.
Yeah.
They weren't against that, and that stirred. I know Leviathan, you had that poll and everything, so kind of leapfrogging off of that, I said, you know, I did the whole Twitter thing. I'm a man with a plan, and I got an idea for it. So I'm going to propose this idea to you. The idea of death in hardcore is basically you lost your character, but what did you really lose? You lost time. It was the time investment in that character is now gone, so you lost time. So the time loss is the punishment. So how can we replicate that time loss punishment without you losing your character? So I was thinking, would you say, hey, you pop in and Fluffy is over there because he's playing hardcore.
Some bullshit.
And you go over and you're like, do I really want to bother with him and everything like that? I mean, do I really want to end his character permanently? I mean, that may be a loaded question. But with the rule set of like making PvP and hardcore still a thing, that you don't lose your character, but there's still a punishment. How would your mindset change in a hardcore PvP environment where if you went up to Fluffy and you ganked his ass, and by doing so, it knocked his character out of any PvP zone for say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, so then you could exploit the PvE content and he was locked out. So not only were you getting the benefit of going after the PvE mobs that you fought for and you beat him to get, but he was now locked out as that time punishment penalty. And you know, he could be like cursing your name, going like, oh, I just can't wait till this buff's done. Like he's pacing at like the border back and forth going, just let me in, just let me in, just let me in. I want to go get him. Would you feel that being a good compromise? Would you feel nah, man, hardcore life, PvP is PvP. If I die, I die. I sign that contract, and that's just the way I go. I live or die.
It's tough because I do think that you're on the right track, that we need to develop a system that kind of replicates death, because I did in that poll receive a bunch of responses besides just yes, no, indifferent, that mention that, you know, the big issue at hand is if you stay true to death is death, that you are actively whittling down the pool of participants just by virtue of the way the mode is supposed to work. And to me, that feels bad because it could turn a bunch of people off of it from the future because they rebuild their character up and they're like, last time I died was from PvP, so I don't want to lose my character again, so I'm just not in PvP for a while. Or B, they just don't play hardcore again or something, you know? Like the last thing I want to do is turn people off of hardcore. So if I look to your idea specifically, I start to poke holes in it because I wonder what happens if you're in a party. What if Lord Fluffy and Peachild are playing together and I kill Lord Fluffy, but Peachild manages to get away, so Peachild can come back into the zone, but Fluffy can't. So now they have to just give up on partying, or maybe they stay party, but they go do a different activity. You've actually punished 2 players just by killing 1. And so it makes me wonder, like, do you want to desync players from different states? That could be kind of something to solve there. And also, does it lock you out from all PvP zones or just the one you lost in? Do you go to the next one? Because I do like your idea. I will say that I do like the idea because it's kind of cool. Almost inspires this King of the Hill moment where you take over the whole zone. And you're just like, I'm free farming in here. And they're just coming in one by one. You kill them. This is still my zone. They, like, someone else is like, this one guy, like, we got to get a party together to kill him. And you kill them and it's still your zone. So that's kind of a cool idea. But I wonder if it's probably like the start of an idea and it needs to be refined further. I don't have any great solutions. Nine, what do you think?
This is one that actually came up like when they announced arenas back in Diablo 3, and so I went and did some like hunting, and there wasn't any resolution back then either for the question of hardcore PvP. You know, it's something that obviously you want to go through and do. You know, PvP is a fun aspect of the game that hardcore players would like to experience as well, but it's the conundrum of permanent death. You know, you make a good analogy with, like, you lose time. There is like some gear loss and such that, you know, you could tie in with that as well. But the whole thing of the character now is no more. I have to create a new one in order to go through and play again. But it's like a numbers thing. I think I actually, you know, kind of like I don't remember if I mentioned that in the poll or if I mentioned that when we were talking about it, you know, on Danktuary or whatever, but it comes down to numbers, because say you start off with 10,000 hardcore players that are PvPing. After just like 10 iterations of, you know, one must stand, one must fall, you have 10 hardcore players left. You know, if there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser where one person lives and another person dies, and you're basically having the PvP population after every round of combat or whatever it is that it's going to be, you know, it just takes 10 rounds and you have 10 players left from 10,000. You know, it's brutal when you go through and you look at like the math behind it. And so that's why my thought is, in order to keep it true to hardcore, you kind of have to have permanent death, but then that also kind of is like the permanent death of PvP.
Of PvP.
Yeah. You know, and that it's like maybe it's like just that's the way that it is, and like hardcore always does. It takes a different form. You know, because a lot of times dueling in like hardcore duels in D2 were to like 50%. You know, you know, and so they would, because they had to create all of their own rules for the PvP anyways, but it wasn't like to the death, you know, or it was like to the yield or something. But when you have like the game mode, you're just gonna have a random passerby. It's not a instance game where only you and other opted in, you know, participants are taking part in it. If you're just out in the world, you know, no one else is gonna be like, oh, okay, I got you to 50%, I won. You know,
right. Yeah, that's what Muggle Mama's husband was saying too. Like, without it being like instanced or sort of like codified rules.
Yeah.
You know, you lose duels. You lose sort of that 1v1 or like organized team against team, because, like you said, passersby could come and mess up your whole thing.
Yep.
Something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that probably the PvP community is gonna come up with like their own take on it, and so you only walk into those zones, you know, with like no offense and complete defense. You take an hour to kill a mob, and you refine one shard at a time. You know, and as soon as someone else, you know, shows up in the zone, you leave. You know, it could be like kind of like, you know, things like that, or, you know, maybe they'll have like you know, there's gonna be like a secret police. They're like the top players are gonna come in and be like, oh, okay, it's your turn to farm. You're allowed in, and we're here to guard. You know, make sure that no one else comes in and, you know, screws with our set farming sessions or whatever. You know, you have no idea, but it's a big question. There's not an easy answer.
Yeah. The only system I could think of, and I think we would maybe be able to reapproach this as the game develops further and we learn more about just like what's in the game. But Joe, in that same answer, also gave the little nugget about the Scroll of Escape, which is going to be a hardcore specific consumable. And basically you can use it to escape from the jaws of death. Like if you feel like you're about to take fatal damage or something, you personally as a player can use it. It's going to be super rare. He said like you may only have one of these, like you won't have 50, you maybe will have 2. And if you disconnect, then the game will also try to use it for you as well to save you. One thing I thought was like maybe the way to keep hardcore, but still a little safety from PvP is that you always have a Scroll of Escape in PvP. Like it just one is active for you during the time that you're in the zone. And if someone kills you, the same tenets of how it works happen. So what Joe said was that it teleports you randomly. So you're not technically safe from death because you can get teleported into like, you know, a boss, and the boss just like maybe you're low health from the teleport, maybe doesn't heal you, and it just slaps you and now you're dead. Or you teleport right into the middle of a pack, or maybe you teleport to town and you're good.
I liked, you know, kind of like the potential endless loop that situation could occur with one of his own examples. Say you use the Scroll of Escape in a PvP zone, it has a chance of dropping you in a different PvP zone. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little hilarious. It's like, oh yeah, well, yeah.
But because I didn't get to finish though.
Yeah, sorry.
The one last part of this that I think if we're going to codify it into the PvP system is that since you do always have one, this actually keys in on Dred's thing. It could be on a cooldown. So if you proc it, maybe it has a 2-hour cooldown or something, and so now you're locked out of PvP for 2 hours. I mean, technically not locked out. You could do it, but you
can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole player agency thing, and like I said, in the example I said, you're locked out for 30 minutes. Well, you can make it 2 minutes. So P-Child and Fluffy, your example, P-Child's kind of running for his life, but Fluffy's kind of like, you know, man, you gotta live, man. Like we both made this active decision to come in here together. We thought we'd be hot shit, and I got my ass handed to me. Live, do what you gotta do, evade, hide. And I'll be back in 2 minutes. And I originally said all PvP zones. It could be just to the zone that you got killed from. And
because that was one thing that tied into a lot of our predictions, is that they did actually show us at least like little snippets of 3 separate PvP zones that they had. So there are going to be scattered all throughout the world.
Yeah, and this is probably like question that I don't know if there will ever be an answer for, because it's something that we've all dealt with, but you two, especially Leviathan, has had very unfortunate encounters for, is the fact of server stability, internet stability, personal computer stability. And now that they're at least now saying like, we have ways of detecting you're disconnected, and if we find that you've been disconnected is true, we will attempt to use this scroll, but this scroll is really rare. And I'm going like, it doesn't seem like a slippery slope, yet it seems like one step on with the other step waiting, because I'm going like, oh boy. if there, it's like unfortunately how like the community is. It's like if you give the community a cookie, it's gonna want a glass of milk. If you give it a glass of milk, so it's like, I don't know if having so few, having it basically be you only have one, if you're lucky and you treasure it, I don't know if that's necessarily the right number. Maybe 2. I think no more than 3 would be probably a little bit better, especially like, oh, you're doing a dungeon and you get disconnected. Is it the Blizzard server? Is it the ISPs getting DDoSed? Is it your local Cox server having issues? Is it your computer? Did your Wi-Fi adapter decide to shit the bed? So it's like one of those things, like they brought up the whole fact of disconnect, which I think is in a small way a little Pandora's box. I don't think it's a big concern. I just hope they kind of reflect back on your idea, Levi, maybe taking the scroll, making it a cooldown. That may be ultimately a better solution. but I was just wondering about the whole rarity, and they would use it for a disconnect as that microcosm that they gave us during the group interview.
So on that end, I think that you already gave the answer to this, though, is that the contract is signed when you make this character. Like, hardcore is hardcore. We're already used to dealing with a system from D3 where it's online only, and if you die, you die. It does suck.
Yeah.
But this is actually like an improvement on that. And so I feel like, sure, players could then be like, well, you gave us a way around like mishaps with disconnects. Why not just have it be that way all the time? But I feel like that would make hardcore, you're starting to trivialize hardcore at some point if you can say every 2 hours, feel free to disconnect, pull your internet because we're going to scroll of escape you. And sure, you can still die, but it's just like there should be a limit. I think it should really be super rare, and they'll find the right number, I suppose. But like, you're gonna feel like you've won the lottery when you've got one of these things. You're like, I'm gonna go do some like super hard content. Maybe there is some crazy, like, you know, super endgame boss or something. I'm gonna go try and fight that because I have this extra thing in my pocket. And we don't even know if there are like cheat deaths in the game as well and other stuff like that. So there's like all sorts of additional systems to consider. But yeah, I think I would still lean on the side of like, knowing the hardcore community would want hardcore to matter because that's the reason they play it to begin with. I don't think I could see them being like, we should have 50 of these things or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts. Even though it's been a few seasons since I last played hardcore, but if you made something like the Scroll of Escape just have a cooldown, you know, it's like the Scroll of Escape is like kind of like a better cheat death, because if you have a cheat death proc, you're still in the thick of things. You have to find if you want to, you know, if you're in over your head and you want to pull out and try and save your character. You know, you have to find that escape route. You have to have that avenue to actually remove yourself from the situation, or take the choice of, I'm going to try and push through. The Scroll of Escape is just, I'm just going to roll the dice. Like, I have no more agency in what happens to my character. I hope that I don't go into the, you know, like a boss fight, or I get dropped in lava, or into, you know, like one of the Fields of Hatred. You know, I'm rolling the dice to try and save my character at that point. And to me, it's, you know, it's kind of like a way out, but it completely removes you from the scenario, and it literally is luck at that point. You're just trusting fate to save your character instead of being able to, you know, play it through with your own gumption. That, you know, that's just kind of like the way that I view it. I would be fine. You know, like it's a great mechanic for like boss fights, because like in D3 you can't remove yourself from a boss fight. In some of those, when you were playing through for the very first time, like how many characters did Belial kill on hardcore at the launch of the game, barring server issues, because you had no idea what to expect. You know, it was, you know, like there's the butchers, the Duriels, Belials, Malthiels of the game, where you have no clue what's behind that door. You do not know what you're getting yourself into, and it is like, if you just happen to have one of those items, I have a way out. There's a little bit of hope. I don't have as much trepidation going through and clicking that button and going into that screen, because I've got a little bit of protection, and so I can play a bit riskier than I might normally not do.
Yeah, that's why I asked both of you, because you have the hardcore experience. The reason why I was laughing before, because I had a thought of like kind of related but not, is like towards the end of a season, a whole bunch of hardcore characters saying like, okay, let's have a contest. Let's see how much damage each one of us could do to a Shava before we use our one scroll and get the hell out of Dodge.
So I'm sure that the goal is going to be who can solo a Shava and hardcore. You know,
oh yeah,
and you'll have communities that will all just kind of sit around and watch, like the voyeurs we all are.
Blood sport,
right?
I am not entertained.
But yeah, that was we got some like tidbits. We got some like a little bit of clarifications. You know, we got some good philosophies and some groundwork laid for Diablo 4. Well, as obviously we got to see the rogue. I know, what was it? Lord Fluffy was kind of like you know, the rogue is going to be the best class that there is because it got developed later, and then the barbarian and the druid are just going to release as they are, and they're never going to go back and touch them because this is Blizzard. But I at least want to remain hopeful with that. You know, this is Blizzard really kind of flexing their creativity, and that they showed us the druid and the barbarian and the sorceress, and they were truly very early in development, and they hadn't gotten to the point where they had these systems. And the rogue is just the one that happened to be one of the more better developed, you know, classes. You know, before they go and, you know, show us the next one, and that we'll get a little bit more depth added to those, because it does feel really bad that the rogue has an arsenal but more, you know, and that we'll see things that will bring those other classes up to those levels. And
what would be super troll is if they do the necromancer next, and like one of the things right now in D3 is like whenever there's just extra cube stuff, like the necros just have so many weapon choices. Maybe the necro gets the arsenal system and it can specialize and it can do something else and summon. Like they just keep combining all the cool stuff from the past to the next class.
Like an arsenal, their skeletons.
They bring back the Iron Golem, and so you can take a weapon and have it permanently equipped that will affect all of your other abilities. While you have two, you literally get the benefit of like two weapons at once instead of having to swap like the barbarian or the rogue does.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
And all the like legendaries and uniques and everything that come with it are all active too. It's like the Emanate system from the Follower. They're testing it for the Necro.
They're testing it for the Necro. Oh man, I cannot wait to go and play with an Iron Golem again, because it would actually, the Iron Golem actually would take the effects of the item that you used when you created it back in D2. That's so if you think about it, that's crazy tech for that time. Yeah, so man, oh man, I'm excited. I'm super excited, but yeah, you know, it's one of those things. The future is dark and bright at the same time, in terms of Diablo 4. The things that we went through and saw were awesome. It does kind of tie in with what we already know, that the game is still early in development. There were some high hopes that we would get both classes revealed, you know, but it was just. The game's just too early. It's too soon, just too soon to be announcing all of the classes. So they've got a lot more to go through and work on. So we're at least another BlizzCon away before we get anywhere close to the final, you know, the final works of D4. And hey, we got you know, more dev blogs going through coming up, which is one of the greatest parts of the D4 development cycle, is that they're keeping us up to date. We're getting more information on the development of this game than we had, you know, previously. I still would like to see this reflected in Diablo Immortal, but you know, we'll wait and see. And hey, we're, you know, even though D4 is so far off, we've got two new Diablo games, you know, coming this year. We've got Immortal, and we've got Diablo 2 Resurrected. And there's actually a question that I would like to ask that Rax asked on the Danctuary that I felt was pretty cool. So Leviathan Dread, we are later in this year. D2 Resurrected and Diablo Immortal are releasing on the same exact day. Which one do you play?
My first question is, Blizzard, what have you done? Why did this happen?
Don't your marketing teams talk to each other? Jesus Christ.
No, they don't. Do you remember the last Diablo season launching like 3 days before Shadowlands dropped? So.
Not true.
And then a year before that, 3 days before Classic?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dread.
Answer the question. Leviathan, you didn't answer the question.
No, I'm making Dread go first.
Okay.
Oh, no. I would probably play like the second season of like Diablo 2 Resurrected, you know, to get that experience with like modern tech, but no, it's like Immortal 100% of the way.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
It's like, it's really, to me, the difference between a new game and an old game. Like, I know Neinball is going to be insanely pumped, and like, I want to be there when Neinball is playing D2 because I feel like I get so much of the, like, I played, so, you know, just so everyone is aware, I played a crap ton of D2. I had a level 99 Sork, level 90 plus Barb, level 90 plus Amazon, tons and tons and tons of time in cows and stuff. I actually ended up leaving the game before some of the more interesting things happened, like synergies, Ubers, a Nihilist Charm. Like, so I actually haven't seen some of that. So technically there is some new game left for me in D2. But when I think about it, I'm just like, well, I spent thousands of hours in that game already, and I kind of know what to expect. Whereas in Immortal, I have no idea what to expect. And I know I want to grind that a lot because I've seen what happens when you grind it a lot already, and it wasn't even done, nearly done. So I think if it was the same day, I would Immortal it up. I'd turn on Neinball's stream and see what he has chosen to do. And then at some point, I think like Dred said, like I would try to make plans at least for a future ladder reset or something. Like, hey, let's all jump on at the same time because it'll be there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you went through and you turned on my screen, you'd just be seeing me run behind your character. Because for me, it's like not even. It wasn't when Rax had posed that question. It really wasn't even a question. Like you said, I have put thousands upon thousands of hours into D2, and while it's awesome that they're keeping it true, it's not anything new. It's D2. It's a game that I've played and remember with some quality of life changes. I'm gonna play the new game. I'm gonna play Immortal. I'm gonna have the new experiences, that they're going through and having with that game. I will absolutely love playing Diablo 2 Resurrected. I will love playing alongside Dredscythe and seeing his reactions for his first time playing through the game. I will love being able to see the fucking poison clouds in the halls of Vought when the Serpent Maguses spawn. Which I'm glad that they answered the question in the Q&A that, it's like, no, I do not like invisible poison clouds. Thank you very much. It's great, but I've been there. I've done that. I want Immortal. I'm looking forward to Immortal. The game played amazing without any in-game systems in the technical alpha, and I can't wait to see what raids and group PvP are going to be like in that game, what their take and version of the Necromancer is going to play like. It's going to be awesome, and that will probably end up being it's always hard to say that that's going to be my game of choice until you actually get to fully play the package. But just sinking 60-70 hours into that game with the 2 weeks that we had it, that game has got everything that you want for a Diablo title and more.
So, now that we've all answered the way we have, and I think when this question is posed, most people answer this way as well. To me, it sounds like if Blizzard's listening, they need to, if both games are coming out this year, they actually need to make sure D2 Resurrected launches before.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people are going to just go on the Immortal track, and if Resurrected comes out, they may just delay purchasing it or, wait a while and just stick to Immortal.
Yeah.
Yeah. In I think it was the Diablo Immortal Reddit when everything was announced and everyone was talking about timelines. It's like if they had to come out during this year, it almost seems like Resurrected is like almost ready to get into like its opt-in tech alpha and then release. So I would will bet going into March, so it's end of Q1. I'm willing to bet probably I say early Q3, like midsummer. It's probably when it's gonna come out. So there can be like a full quarter between D2 Resurrected and probably our predicted earliest Diablo Immortal release. So enough people who want to get it and just have that initial playthrough of nostalgia, and then it's there whenever they want to come back to it. They have enough chance to play, and then they have between a month to say 4 months, and then Immortal comes out, and then they could just take that for a long ride until either they wait for the next Diablo 3 season to come along, or they're just relaxing in their chairs playing on the can, waiting to be called at the dentist's office or whatever.
Yeah.
Diablo 4 comes out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that sounds like a solid timeline. Because also, if we think that ladders seasons are gonna shorten, which they mentioned they want to do right now, they're like 6 months. If they half that to 3 months, and you come out at the end of, or sorry, the beginning, end of Q2, beginning of Q3, that's like a 3 month, basically a quarter, and then you get like the winter or so like late fall launch for Immortal, which also then like puts in that nice Christmas realm as well too. So.
Yeah.
I like everything you're putting down.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Make it so, number 2, or whatever the quote is.
Number 1.
Number 1.
Yep.
I have to take a number 1.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that means that we're wrapping up the stream here. That seems good enough. Good enough for me. But yeah.
Well, I'm trying to start the stream.
But yeah, that pretty much is gonna go through, close us out. You know, I think overall we're good. You know, like B minus on some of those predictions. You know, obviously we got an F when it came to Immortal. You know that, but you know who's to say? We were having expectations that they were going to use it to go through and announce things, and it was more so that ended up kind of being a more of a kind of like a jumping point to introduce people, because you have to say that the community as a whole has been very hostile towards Immortal. They've not wanted to hear anything, and that when the technical alpha came out, all the big players, your Leviathans, your Rikers, your Bloodsheds and such, they all enjoyed the game. And so the community perception began to turn. And this was just like another piece to go through and get more of that positivity behind the game, so that way people are ready to more interact with it and not react with hostility when they start pumping out news and announcements for it. So, we hope that kind of like that prediction for the tertiary news and updates and not wanting to cross the news streams pans forth, and that we're going to get some updates for Immortal here soon. The Diablo 3 changes are well beyond any scope that I thought that they were ever going to see development in this game ever again, and gives me huge hopes for what they might do in the future, because now they're going and doing stuff like that. Hell, nothing's off the table at this point. Adding whole new features to the game like this, that's huge. D2 Resurrected, it's not a meme anymore, boys. It's here. It's coming. And of course, Diablo 4 just continues to look better and better, and the philosophies behind the game are solid. If these are the things that are going to carry them through all the way to launch, and I can't wait to see more. Now we'll kind of go through and begin to drop us out of the episode. And again, thank you to Leviathan and Dredscythe for coming and joining me here. If you guys would like to give a quick shout out on where people can go through and find you on the interwebs.
Sure, I'll go first. I am on my Twitch stream. I'm going to start it up tomorrow, well, maybe whatever day you hear this, but when PTR starts, which is February 25th, I'll be really trying to get back into the consistent streams. Leviathan 111 over on Twitch, and lots of YouTube content, because I still have to do more coverage of BlizzCon Line. So if you want more individual thoughts than you heard here, then I'll be doing some videos on that, and that's Leviathan D3 on YouTube.
Yep, and you can find me mainly on Twitter, so that's @Dredscythe, and with all the Diablo news and the birth of new questions that we as a community have to tackle, such as PvP, hardcore deaths, the economy, as well as Immortal, and just everything galore. I may be starting up a new, shorter video series than the Development Hell series is on BlizzPro.com as well. Be the site manager there, Revamping Diablo. You can go there for news as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and of course you can go through and you can find me over here at the Westmarch Workshop, where we do a new episode every other Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Though with all the news and updates that have been coming, we might have a little bit more of a weekly cadence with some of those updates, as we expect future news to be coming relatively soon. So just keep your eyes and ears open. You can follow me here at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. You can follow the show on Twitter at the WM Workshop, or you can follow me personally over at Neinball Gamer on Twitter. and I talk about Diablo and Warhammer and other geeky nerdy stuff. But if you have any questions, thoughts, or feedback, please feel free to drop me a line at westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. Which Longshot, I saw your email and I like some of your ideas, and we'll talk about that in the future. But yeah, keep your eyes on the show and look forward to future updates. And with that, I wish you all a good night, and I'll catch you all next time.
Pale man. It's Rathbone.
The flames. The flames that I am seeing right now